here this afternoon. We're here to talk about something that doesn't get discussed very often, which is who should be the next Librarian of Congress. As we all know, the nominee, Dr. Carla Hayden, is the President's nominee to be the 14th Librarian of Congress. Her successor, Dr. Billington, served ably for 28 years. Senator Schumer and I worked last year together to establish a term for this job, and so Dr. Hayden is the first person to be appointed for a specific term. That term would be 10 years. There's no reason to believe you couldn't be reappointed to that term, but 10 years is enough time to get, we believe, lots of things done. This is an important job. It's an important office. I think Dr. Hayden's been a great representative of herself as she's met with members of the Senate. I know you're supported here today by your mother. It's always good to have your mother with you, and so I was glad to get to meet Dr. Hayden's mother, Colleen Hayden, sitting right there behind her. I also know that members of your family are going to be watching this close to where I live in Missouri, as they're in Illinois and other places in the middle of the country. We certainly are glad to be joined by our two colleagues from Maryland and by Senator Sarbanes. And Senator Mikulski, if you'd like to start, I'd like you to be the first person to introduce Dr. Hayden to the committee.
Thank you very much, Senator Blunt, for organizing and holding this hearing and to have done it in such an expeditious way. We know that the President has nominated Dr. Hayden just a few months ago, and after the appropriate and rigorous vetting process, you've moved on this. And we sincerely want to thank you for that courtesy, and Senator Schumer, you as well. We in Maryland are here to support the nomination of Dr. Hayden to be the chief librarian of the Library of Congress. We're so happy that her mother, Colleen, has joined her today. I feel a close relationship with both of them. Colleen is also a sister social worker. And by the way, the Maryland delegation is not trying to change the Constitution. There are only 2 senators elected at the moment, but Senator Sarbanes, our emeritus, is also a very active member of the Enoch Pratt board, and so he's here with us today to show support and solidarity. As you look out in the audience, you see a unique group of people of all ages and diversity who are here to support Dr. Hayden as well. These are the people of the board and the executive advisory committee who will, in their own time and their own dime, work to make the Enoch Pratt Library one of the best and premier library systems in America. And the fact that she has such broad support, I think, indicates what her leadership has been. Dr. Hayden has been the CEO of the Enoch Pratt Library for over 20 years. Her nomination is bittersweet. It will be a great, great gain for the nation, but it will be a loss for Baltimore. We will be very proud if Dr. Hayden is confirmed, because she once again will be the first African American to be, and the first woman to be the Librarian of Congress. But it's not about only breaking barriers. It's about all what she will bring. As I bring someone forward for support, for confirmation, I look, do they have competence? Do they have commitment to the mission of the agency? And do they have integrity? Dr. Hayden meets all 3 of those. She surpasses those high standards. Her track record is proof enough. But when you meet her, as you have, you will know that it is her character and commitment that really shines forth. Dr. Hayden was born in Florida, and by any metrics to measure who should be the top librarian for the United States of America, is Dr. Hayden. Her academic career speaks for itself. Bachelor of Arts, Roosevelt University. A master's and a PhD from the esteemed Library School of the University of Chicago. She started her career as a library service coordinator at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. She was an assistant professor at the University of Pittsburgh, went back to Chicago to work there. There she rose through the ranks as one of the top children's librarians in the United States of America. Then Baltimore called, and she came 20 years ago to what was really one of the early libraries in the United States. But the Enoch Pratt was not only a great repository, it had to be modernized. And that's where she showed not only that she was a great librarian, but that she was a superb manager. She guided through a fundraising effort to improve the annex. She made sure that what she did also was to digitize the library and then find a way in very tight budget conditions to take the library throughout Baltimore and even throughout the state. Professionally, she's received the Librarian of the Year award. She has been the past president of the American Library Association. She's received the American Library Association Esteemed Lippincott Award given to those librarians for outstanding and distinguished service. Right now, she is overseeing a $114 million renovation of the Enoch Pratt. She's worked with legislators, with city councils, of which I served, with the Maryland General Assembly, in which Senator Cardin and Senator Sarbanes have served. So she knows how to work with the elected, but she knows how to work with people. If you saw where our library was in leafy, prosperous neighborhoods and in hardscrabble neighborhoods, the library is there, open to all, serving all. And during the last year, during our really tough challenges, when we were facing the uprising because of Freddie Gray's death, the schools closed. Across the street from what they called Ground Zero at a street called Pennsylvania Avenue and North, there was a burned out CVS because it had been raided for opioids, a scourge you're so familiar with and been an advocate on solving. But across the street from that was the Enoch Pratt Penn North Library. Dr. Hayden kept that library open, and she kept libraries open during the entire period. Children had a place to go. The community had a place to gather. And when the feeding program stopped because there was fear of coming into the neighborhoods, they came to the library. And so literally, Dr. Hayden's leadership and her grit and the staff that she inspired fed body, mind, and spirit during those very tough days. I think this is someone who brings a distinguished academic career, a credentialed career, a strong fiscal manager, and really a fantastic human being. And I'm honored to present her to you.
Thank you, Senator Mikulski. Senator Cardin.
Chairman Blunt, Senator Schumer, Senator Cochran, Senator Capito, thank you very much for being here, and thank you for allowing Maryland to have 3 United States senators today. It's great to
Ask
be
unanimous consent that be made permanent.
Well, that could help.
We're holding an objection here.
But I join with Senator Mikulski in strong support for Dr. Hayden. We're very proud of her leadership in Baltimore, and that we know that she will do an incredible job at the Library of Congress. And it's great to be here with Senator Sarbanes, who has taken a great interest in the Pratt Libraries in Baltimore and has been a great champion of these issues in our state, in our nation. And we're here with a lot of people from our community that Dr. Hayden has worked with and has championed over her tenure at the Enoch Pratt Library. Today's hearing is well timed. This Sunday marks the 216th anniversary of the creation of the library in 1800. So Senator Mikulski and I were blessed to be Baltimoreans by birth. Other people, such as Dr. Hayden, had the good sense to move to Baltimore. For the last 23 years, she has directed the Enoch Pratt Free Library, which isn't quite as old as the Library of Congress, but it was established in 1882, a great tradition for our community, making it one of the oldest free public libraries in the nation. In 1994, Maryland was the first state in the nation to offer statewide internet service to its residents with the introduction of Saylor, Maryland's online public information network. The Saylor Operations Center is housed in the Enoch Pratt Library State Resource Center. So Dr. Hayden doesn't just run the public library system for Baltimore City. She oversees the State Library Resource Center, which provides all Marylanders with access to internet and other services. I think that skills will be very well for her as she takes on the responsibilities of the Library of Congress, which is, as you know, not only throughout our country, is actually a world resource. During Dr. Hayden's tenure, 8 of Enoch Pratt branches were either opened or reopened or renovated. I mention that because we have people here. Rachel Monroe is here, who runs the Weinberg Foundation, partnered with the Pratt Library to be able to put libraries in schools that didn't have schools in Baltimore City. It was that type of creativity that Dr. Hayden encouraged, that is leveraging private sector involvement with our schools to make sure that we had access to libraries for all children in Baltimore. As Senator Mikulski said during the disturbances in Baltimore, yes, in Sandtown we had a library that was literally a place where people could go and knew that they would be safe. Right after the disturbances, I was in Sandtown. I was in that library. I did meet with people in that library, and it was a center where people gathered. And Dr. Hayden understands that, and the libraries in Baltimore have been more than just the traditional libraries. It has been a place in which a community could grow and have confidence, and children could go for peace and quiet. It's no surprise then that Dr. Hayden was named Library Journal Librarian of the Year in 1995 and was elected to serve as president of the American Library Association from 2003 to 2004. Before Dr. Hayden moved to Baltimore, she was assistant professor for library and information science at my alma mater, the University of Pittsburgh, from 1987 to 1991, further evidence of her excellent judgment. She has an outstanding resume. She has experience, she has the integrity, she has the proven leadership, and she's delivered results. So in addition to being superbly qualified, Dr. Hayden will make history as the first African American, the first female to be Librarian of Congress, bring a fresh new perspective to the job and its challenges. And I agree with Senator Mikulski. Dr. Hayden is the best qualified for this position, and she will bring the perspectives that I think are needed to take the Library of Congress to its next chapter in the history of our nation. What a great resource we have. We all know that. This is a world resource. Whenever there's a slow day here, I love to go over to the Library of Congress and just get inspired. And I honestly and truly believe that Dr. Hayden will take that library to the next chapter, and a proud chapter for the American people, and I strongly endorse her candidacy.
Thank you, Senator Cardin. Senator Sarbanes, would love to hear from you if you have a comment or two.
Chairman and Senator Schumer and members of the committee, thank you very much for your generosity in letting me say just a few words. My wife served for many years on the Enoch Pratt Free Library Board. It was a very large part of her life, and she was very committed. When she passed away, the library people were more than generous and placed me on the board, and I've been on the board now for the last 6 years. So I've had an opportunity to observe Carla Hayden at work very closely. I mean, I want to tell you, this is an extraordinarily able, dedicated, committed person. And I can't tell you how excited I am about her nomination to become the Librarian of Congress. The nation will be extremely well served by her. The Pratt Library had her leadership for 20 years, and we prospered and thrived under it. Enoch Pratt was a 19th century merchant who established the library back in now 2 centuries ago, and had the foresight to say it was going to be open to all. And Carla Hayden has carried that through, and the library has been an incredibly strong, fundamental institution in our community. She'll do an absolutely terrific job as a Librarian of Congress. You've got, well, the 3 senators here have represented Maryland in the Senate over the last 30 years. So you've got a strong recent endorsement of this point of view, and I strongly urge her confirmation by the committee. And thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Senator Sarbanes. Senator Mikulski has let me know recently that beginning next January, the Senate should particularly listen to former senators and the good advice they would have. And Dr. Hayden, to be joined by Senator Cardin and Senator Mikulski, 2 of the most highly respected members of the Senate, and all 3 of these people talking about your great leadership for 2 decades at the Enoch Pratt Library means a lot to me, and I'm sure the committee. I had an additional recommendation for the record. I was at the Ferguson, Missouri Municipal Library just last week. That library was named the Gale Library Journal Library of the Year of 2015. And I know that you and Mr. Bonner, the director of that library, Scott Bonner, have served together, have presented together on a couple of panels about how the library can fill its needs in times of unrest. Both of your libraries became safe havens when schools were closed, when local businesses were closed, when government offices were closed. Your library and that library stayed open. Mr. Bonner, who I'd talked to earlier on the phone about you, told me that for him you were a personal hero, and he thought you were the most capable individual possible to run the Library of Congress. So that was a pretty good recommendation from a Missourian about what you've done. You know, the role of the Librarian of Congress involves much more than the title would indicate. The Library of Congress is our country's oldest cultural institution and was created by our founders, as Senator Cardin said, 200 years ago in 1800. It was created to promote scholarship, to promote creativity, and really with the goal of becoming a world-class repository for a vast collection of works. Leading the Library of Congress requires multitasking on a scale that is rarely necessary in almost any other government organization. The librarian secures and preserves the world's largest collection of books and other creative work, including the largest database anywhere of copyrighted works. The librarian manages more than 3,000 people. The librarian serves as an impartial and objective head of Congress's research organization, and the librarian oversees the copyright office. Sounds like a big job, and we're here to talk to you about it, but that vital role that's played in cultural preservation and scholarship has been run by individuals with lots of different backgrounds, not that many of them in the history of the country going back to 1800. Only 13 previous librarians. One was a medical doctor, one was an editor, there was a journalist, a printer, a poet, a political scientist, a historian. 2 clerks of the House of Representatives were librarians of Congress. 2 lawyers, 2 individuals who were either a professional library administrator or had prior library experience. In fact, the longest serving librarian of Congress, who became a librarian at the turn of the 20th century and served right up until the beginning of World War II, serving for 4 decades, was a lifelong library administrator. It's fitting, I think, that the nominee comes here today with the background and in her professional life as a librarian and a scholar in the library sciences. She is the chief librarian at the Enoch Pratt Library, but also has been the chief librarian of the Chicago Public Library, the CEO of the Enoch Pratt Library, assistant professor at the University of Pittsburgh School of Library and Information Services. Now, the next Librarian of Congress will lead an organization that has really had significant physical and technological limitations and is struggling really to adapt to a new century. Due to the historic shortage of storage space, the librarians had millions of items stored in places that need to find a better way to store them. There's risk of degradation of some of the collection. In addition, a recent information technology management challenge have raised questions about the library's ability to serve future generations as more and more collections need to be digitally collected, preserved, and made available to the public. I certainly look forward, Dr. Hayden, to hearing your testimony today on your vision as to how this job needs to be done. Before I turn to Senator Schumer, just a couple of housekeeping comments. The committee will be accepting written testimony from outside parties until Wednesday, April the 22nd. Information on how to submit written testimony can be found on the Rules Committee website. In addition, the committee will keep the record open for members of the committee to submit questions for the nominee until Wednesday, May the 4th. As has already been mentioned, Senator Schumer and I worked last year to create the first defined term, which doesn't just set a term, but also sets a framework of opportunity. And we've been glad to work together on those and other issues, and I'd like to turn to him now for his comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a opening statement, but if our colleagues, I know the schedules are busy, if you guys have to go, you can read my statement in the record if you'd prefer. Thank you. And I want to thank all of my colleagues, my two present colleagues and my former colleague, Senator Sarbanes. To him I would say Yasu, because we saw each other at the Greek Independence Day parade in New York a week or two ago. Okay, well, I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for moving forward with this nomination. And Dr. Hayden, I'd like to welcome you here today. I congratulate you on your nomination as the 14th Librarian of Congress. And my colleagues, Senator Mikulski and Cardin, my former colleague, Senator Sarbanes, have been effusive in their praise. I share their enthusiasm for your nomination. Under your leadership, the Enoch Pratt Free Library has flourished and serves as an indispensable beacon of higher learning and civic engagement for the city of Baltimore and the entire state of Maryland. And it's no surprise, given your 4-decade career of success and exemplary work in library science. I've no doubt about your qualifications or your ability to lead the Library of Congress. So I'd just like to take a moment to talk about the job you have ahead of you as I see it. The nomination of a new librarian comes at a crucial juncture. We need to ensure that the library has the resources to fulfill its mission, to make its vast collection available and useful to the American people, and to sustain and preserve this unique collection of knowledge and creativity for future generations. In addition, maintaining an effective national copyright system is an integral part of that mission. Content creators and businesses must be able to promptly register and record their copyright interests. Individuals and businesses must be able to readily obtain copyright information that enables them to license copyright works. For that to happen, the Copyright Office must be innovative and efficient. A critical first step is to bring the Copyright Office IT system up to date. In the digital age, issues related to copyrightable content and protection of that content are constantly evolving. So a big priority, it seems to me, for the new librarian should be the implementation of IT investment and planning practices that focus on the Copyright Office. There's a lot of hard work ahead for the new librarian. Balancing competing pressures, budgetary restraints, that work is hugely important. Thankfully, in nominating Dr. Hayden, who Fortune magazine recently called one of the world's 50 greatest leaders, I believe the President has put forward a candidate capable of meeting the library's many challenges and extending its reach beyond its marble halls to further enrich the lives of all Americans. Dr. Hayden, I believe you're the right person to pursue a bold vision of the library's future. It's my hope you'll be swiftly confirmed, and I look forward to working with my colleagues to make that happen shortly.
Thank you, Senator Schumer. We're going to go to questions now after your opening statement, so we look forward to that.
Well, good afternoon, Chairman Blunt, Ranking Member Schumer, and distinguished members of the committee. It is truly a great honor to be here today as you consider my nomination as the 14th Librarian of Congress. Of all the titles I've had in my professional career, I'm most proud to be called a librarian. And it would be my honor to have the opportunity to be the librarian of the oldest cultural institution in the nation, the Library of Congress. It's especially fitting that this testimony is being given in the week following National Library Week, a time when libraries of all types and sizes are celebrated and recognized for their work, and I'm very pleased that my colleagues, many of them are here today. I also want to take this opportunity to thank the senators from Maryland, all three, Senator Mikulski, Senator Cardin, and of course Senator Sarbanes for being here today. Now, this nomination at this time provides an opportunity for me to combine and build on various aspects of my personal and professional life. And my love and passion for reading and books started at a very early age when my mother, who is here today, helped me check out a book, Bright April, the story of an African-American girl with pigtails from a storefront branch in Queens. And I spent summers across from PS 96. I spent summers in Springfield, Illinois, accompanying my grandfather, a retired postal worker, to the Capitol and the State Library, where a fellow church member kept a small collection of books by and about African Americans. These experiences and more were start of my love of books and my steps into libraries. But it wasn't until I met a lady, Judy Zucker, another storefront, this time in Chicago, where my vocation began. She was on the floor during story time for children with autism, demonstrating the power of a librarian's work. And all of my subsequent professional experiences were vital to my directorship of the Enoch Pratt Free Library for years, a leader in public and reference service. And it also is the State Library for Maryland. I had the honor of being president of the American Library Association, ALA, with over 63,000 members. And I led the organization at a time when libraries across the country started to experience severe economic challenges. It was a time of increasing public demand for computer accessibility and also the need to protect the user's privacy. And now I have the distinct honor to be nominated to be the Librarian of Congress with various mandates and responsibilities. As you know, the staff members of the Congressional Research Service are what we call the special forces who support Congress and perhaps are the library's most important constituency. The Library of Congress celebrates the works of authorship and by way of the Copyright Office provides services and support to creators of content. And I must say that coming from a family of musicians and artists, I understand the blood, sweat, and soul that goes into the creative process, and I look forward to working with Congress to ensure a fully functional Copyright Office that supports the community it serves. As I envision the future of this wonderful institution, I'd see it growing in its stature, not only in librarianship, but in how people view libraries in general. As more of its resources are readily available for more people online, users will not have to be in Washington, D.C. Everyone will have a sense of ownership and pride in this national treasure. A child on a reservation in New Mexico will have the same access as a high school student in St. Louis, Missouri. A fifth grader in Bowling Green, Kentucky would be able to view Abraham Lincoln's papers from his home computer. And a shy 10th grader from Meridian, Mississippi, with dreams of performing, would be able to view the library's Leonard Bernstein collection. A student from a community college in Kansas could look at and even download Revolutionary War maps for a class assignment. And this would help libraries across the country. A small library in Arkansas with a modest budget will be able to help patrons assess primary studies of George Washington's papers. And a rural library in Alabama will be able to connect through a live feed to the National Book Festival and see and hear their favorite authors. I envision a Library of Congress that can balance its various roles and important roles in a digital age. At a time when libraries throughout the world face many of the same challenges, when their very existence is being questioned, the Library of Congress should continue to be a leader. I would be honored to be part of the legacy and accomplishments of my predecessors in this position, to be part of a continuing movement to open the treasure chest that is the Library of Congress. This can be done without threatening the library's core responsibilities to support and advise Congress, to serve users of the Copyright Office, and assist researchers who benefit from its exhaustive collection. If confirmed, it would be my privilege to join the dedicated staff and supporters of the library to ensure that its treasures are secured and shared for many years to come. Thank you for your consideration, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Well, thank you, Dr. Hayden. We're glad you're here. We're going to start with a 5-minute round of questions, and there'll be a time for a second round, so we're going to stay pretty close to 5 minutes on that first round, and people can ask other questions later if they have time to stay. You mentioned your predecessor. Of course, Dr. Billington's 28 years in the library saw lots of growth in the library, lots of growth in the collection. His leadership doubled the traditional analog collection. It transformed the original library, the independent building, the first independent building for the library, the Jefferson Building, into a national exhibit venue that's hosted over 100 exhibits and established a host of new programs. He also launched in a new field of outside fundraising, which librarians had not done in the past. And any comments you have about continuing that would be helpful. And then I'd also like to know what new perspective you bring to this, understanding of the mission of the library that you think is going to be able to build on that Billington Foundation.
Well, thank you, Senator, for mentioning the legacy that I would be honored to help continue. At each time, and each of the Librarians of Congress have contributed greatly to the progress of this institution. And most recently, and Dr. Billington reached out to me, and he has offered assistance, and I'm going to would love to take him up on it, to build on the private fundraising and the efforts that he has made. He established the James Madison Council that has garnered so much support and actually helps fund the National Book Festival, provides many special programs that would not be possible without that public-private partnership. And so in terms of continuing, it would be very much, I think, advantageous to build on the preservation of the collection as well as the efforts to use technology to modernize access to the collections.
We'll go to Senator Schumer, and then in the order of attendance, members were Capito, Klobuchar, Cochran, King, Bozeman, and Udall. So it'll be Schumer, Capito, and then we'll see who's here after Senator Capito.
Well, thank you. Historical curiosity. Could you tell us a little about Enoch Pratt? His name is everywhere, the Enoch Pratt Library, and they said he was a merchant, but that's about it. I don't know if you
He
know.
did quite well at being a merchant.
He sure
and I'm
did.
smiling because Enoch Pratt came from Middleborough, Massachusetts, to make his fortune in Baltimore, right after the Civil War, and he did quite well. He developed into a banker. And when Andrew Carnegie, who is widely credited with, and rightfully so, establishing public libraries throughout the country, was not having such a good time at first, he heard about Mr. Pratt in Baltimore and came and visited Baltimore. And Mr. Carnegie said later in his book, The Gospel of Philanthropy, he knew of no other public-private partnership that was better established than Mr. Pratt's. He said he wanted his library free of politics and religion, and also free to all without distinction of race or color in 1886. And he gave $1 million.
Wow.
1886.
Wow. That's great. Well, it's good to just know that little bit of historical
Thank you.
knowledge. Okay, my first question, as you know, libraries' responsibilities include the acquisition, maintenance, and preservation of millions of items in the wide range of traditional and new media, the administration of copyright laws, national program to provide reading material to the blind and handicapped. Could you just give us a short list of some of your priorities?
It's been mentioned, and thank you for bringing up the list of responsibilities, and also referring to one of the biggest challenges, but I'm very pleased to know that this part has been advanced, making sure that the library has the technology infrastructure to accomplish this many roles, particularly with the Copyright Office and modernizing all of its operations. The expansion of the technological capacity will help in not only preserving and making the materials and the collection, the extensive collection, available, but also stabilizing and making the Copyright Office secure. I mentioned that I have a number of artists and creators in my family, and I know the importance of copyright and making sure that people enjoy the content, but also respect the people who create it.
Great, thank you. Second, the National Library Service provides important services to blind and print-disabled readers so that, quote, all may read. NLS regional libraries work to make content available to eligible users in accessible formats. This service is critical to the blind and print-disabled readers of New York. So tell me a little bit about your vision for NLS. How do you see the NLS adopting to meet the evolving needs of the nation's readers?
Again, I'm very pleased that you mentioned that aspect of the Library of Congress's responsibilities. It doesn't always receive as much attention, but it's vitally important. In my experience in Illinois and also in Maryland in the state role, I've had the opportunity to work with the libraries for the blind and physically handicapped. And one thing that would be very helpful would be to make sure that materials that are digitized are available in formats that would allow people with challenges to read in various ways. And so I would be very, if confirmed, very interested and very supportive of expanding that role.
Great. And final question, in nominating you to be librarian, President Obama cited your technological accomplishments at the Enoch Pratt Free Library. How do you see both the Library of Congress and the Copyright Office using upgraded IT systems to advance their respective missions?
I mentioned that I've been very heartened to actually have discussions with the new Chief Information Officer at the Library of Congress. He was appointed in September as a result of a lot of the concern of the technological needs of the Library of Congress, Mr. Bernard Barton. And he has, in that time, accomplished quite a bit in terms of addressing everything in the Government Accountability Office report, in terms of assessing the needs of the Library of Congress, and also making sure that the basic infrastructure can support a fully functional and efficient copyright office. He has assured me, and I'm glad that we are on the record, and I will quote him, that if I am nominated, I'm nominated, but if confirmed, technology will not be a problem.
Great.
And he is very competent. He comes from the Department of Defense.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Schumer. Senator Capito, and then after that, Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Dr. Hayden, for not just your service, but the visit to I'm sure a lot of our offices for a chance for us to get to know you preceding this hearing. I appreciate that. And I think in that conversation, you and I talked that I am the subcommittee chair of the legislative branch on the Appropriations Committee. And so my purview is with the Library of Congress. So if everything goes according to plan, I think we're going to get to know each other very well. So I want to ask, first of all, you mentioned the new Chief Information Officer, which I understand is working well, but there's also another new division called the National and International Outreach. You and I talked about this sort of briefly in the office. I didn't know, I know it's early, but how much time you've had to really look at this. You said that your library has availed yourself many times of the services of the Library of Congress. I didn't know if you had any initial thoughts on that particular part.
Thank you, and I smiled because I had another wonderful session with the head of the newly formed National and International Office. It's 6 months old at the Library of Congress, and its mandate is to expand the outreach of the library's programs and even exhibits throughout the country and the world. And it's being led by the former president of Bryn Mawr College, and also most recently the Kluge Center at the Library of Congress. And that office is looking at all of the ways that it can help. And with Mr. Barton, with the technology infrastructure, it's an exciting time. So 6 months in, but it seems like it's going to be quite an effective way to get the resources out.
Well, I look forward to that. Now, you mentioned in your opening statement that the CRS are the special forces, and all of us, certain here, have availed ourselves of the well-respected research reports that they generate for legislative debate. But this is a bit of the question I'm going to ask is maybe a little bit of a sticky wicket here, but there are members of the public generally don't get access to these reports unless it's through a congressional office or through private databases. And you probably know that there's a discussion and some legislation actually as to whether or not the CRS report should be made available to the public. So without asking you directly, if you want to weigh in on that, I'd be happy to hear. But I didn't know if you had, I would encourage you, or if you had already put some previous thought into ways that the CRS reports could, and CRS itself could sort of modernize maybe some kind of a phone app or something of that nature where there's more accessibility to these very, very valuable reports.
I think that what has been interesting is I've heard different views on the amount of accessibility of the reports that are very extensive. There's so much research that goes into them. There's confidentiality in terms of being able to provide the information. And I would really look forward to the opportunity to study and work with Congress on the cost, staffing, and other aspects of making parts of the reports available, how you make them available without stepping over the line, though, in terms of stepping over the line in terms of how much public
Access.
service you provide. This is the Special Forces and Research Arm for Congress. And so as a public librarian, I know that you do have to balance those two.
Right, and I do think that will probably be a discussion that will be occurring over the next several years. Let me, just wanted to kind of jump in on the IT issue. I know when we're looking at the funding issues, there have been broad requests for more IT funding. The library has made some pretty systemic changes in terms of trying to address that issue. I would just say that, as a member of the Senate, as this valuable resource that we have at the Library of Congress, I think you'll find a lot of support for the biggest and broadest information technology programs that you may need to kind of jump us into the next tranche. I know you've pretty much addressed the issue with Senator Schumer, so I would just kind of associate myself with his remarks.
Thank you. It is a challenge, but I have been assured that they're well on their way.
Thank you very much.
Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations, Doctor, on your nomination. I enjoyed the discussion we had on the phone. A lot of people have been focusing on the copyright issues, technological issues, which I think are really important. But there was one thing I wanted to mention. Senator Leahy and Senator McCain have a bill, and I've joined with them on this bill. And it is about the subjects that just raised on, that Senator Capito raised on CRS. As you know, the library oversees the CRS, and although CRS does not make its reports public, paid websites often obtain copies of many of the CRS reports and then charge their clients for them. Those same reports are not available to Americans, yet their taxes fund the CRS. If lobbyists can buy the report, Senator Leahy, Senator McCain, and I believe that they should be available to all Americans, given that the Americans are paying for those reports. And that's why I'm co-sponsoring this bill. It's called Equal Access to Congressional Research Service Reports Act, and it would ensure that taxpayers have equal access to the reports on a free and public website. And we may or may not want to comment about this bill, but in your view, what is the role of the Library of Congress in promoting transparency of government and making information more accessible to Americans?
Well, thank you for that, because it shines a light on the excellent resources and reference services of the Congressional Research Service and what it does for Congress. And I have heard different views on, and I alluded to that, on how to make the reports and what portions of the reports, when in the process of reference, information is made available. And I look forward to investigating that even more if confirmed, to study how and when public access could benefit. A lot of research goes into those reports.
Yeah,
Excellent.
of course, and I'm looking forward to looking into this more myself. I'm a co-sponsor because to me it just made no sense at all that these are government reports and that they shouldn't be available to all the public. And so, and then they're being, lobbyists are charging their clients to see the work that the government performed at the taxpayers' expense. So I think it's going to be interesting to look at that more, and I appreciate going on this journey together after hopefully you get confirmed for this position. You've also held the position of president of the American Library Association. How do you see that position helping you? You must get to know a lot of the librarians all over the country. I know we were talking about the anniversary of the women's right to vote and have some of the things I'm hoping we can do with that. And could you talk about how knowing some of these librarians and working with them all across the country will be helpful in your current job that you're seeking?
Well, thank you for acknowledging my colleagues, and many of them are here today, including a strong contingent from Maryland. And having the support of the library, broader library community, even getting support from the 56 graduate library schools that are preparing librarians for the future, academic libraries, colleges and universities, special librarians who are special and work with companies and businesses, and also K through 12 librarians in schools all over the country, really helps define what a lead library like the Library of Congress can be. And to be able to network together helps all libraries, and especially the ones that are, as I mentioned in the opening, having their very existence challenged in the age of technology. So grouping together, showing people that there's a continuum from their local library in a small town. I'll mention Sparta, Illinois, a coal mine, former coal town, and then having the resources of the America's Library being able to be put right there will strengthen the network, and I think help create what libraries have always done, an informed electorate and citizen.
Very good. Well, thank you. As I told you on the phone, when I was little, my dream was to be a librarian, and I started my own book catalog with the Dewey Decimal System in a recipe box. So, but then I got this job, so it is what it is. So, anyway, thank you very much, and good luck.
Thank you.
Talk about a blatant appeal to the crowd, having your own Dewey Decimal System. As
In a
little
card
girl.
box?
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Blunt. I'll consider that a compliment.
It was a compliment. It was just showed your total capacity to get to the right point at the right time. Senator Cochran and then Senator King.
Mr. Chairman, I'm honored to be able to be here today, serving as a member of the committee, to congratulate our newest nominee for this important job as Librarian of the Congress. Rather than to delay the questions and others might have, let me just say that I think this is a great day for the Library of Congress. It's a great day for the United States Senate. And many of those expressions of support and appreciation and admiration came through during the delightful event last night that I was pleased to join. So we look forward to working with you as a member of the Oversight Committee, and wish for you all of the successes that you can imagine.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Cochran. Senator King and then Senator Bozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Hayden, welcome to the committee. Appreciate your testimony, appreciate your willingness to undertake this important job. I want to talk for a few minutes about copyright. It seems to me that's one of the most important jobs before you in terms of organization, IT, policy, copyright. I try to explain copyright to my children and their eyes glaze over. They don't know it even exists. We've got a lot of work to do, and copyright is very complex. And I guess one of my questions that I'm not, it's untoward, I suppose, to ask someone at their confirmation hearing about the idea of divesting part of their responsibility, but what are your thoughts on the possibility of spinning out the Copyright Office, having its own presidentially appointed director? It seems to me that the fact that it's lodged in the library is a kind of historic artifact. Should it, given its importance in our society of intellectual property, should it have its own separate existence?
Well, thank you for mentioning young people as well. I'd like to address that and how we could work to make the new digital generation, that they're digital natives, to be aware of what the C means. It should mean caution, and they should respect the fact that they are looking at something. Whenever they see that C, that should be almost a red or a yellow light for them, and they should be taught as early as second or third grade. They should have, one of my favorite examples is to have a project that they've worked 2 or 3 hours on, and they really are proud of it, and then you turn to them and say, Johnny, I'm going to put Thad's name on it. And that is the most graphic way to let them know that art and creativity should be protected. They should get credit for it, and they should do that. In terms of the independence of the office itself, I have heard quite a few proposals, and they all get back to the core concern, and one that I share, that the Copyright Office should be fully functional and should have its independence to carry out its mandates to protect the creators of content. I've mentioned my own personal history, a father who was a recording artist, and going into a mall and hearing snippets of his music, and also knowing that it is vital that artists and creators of content get to register their works and even challenge the use of their works in a timely and efficient fashion. And so I, if confirmed, would take special interest in making sure that that office is able to perform its functions in a way that will protect the people that it serves, and that's the creators of content.
Do you think it would assist in that project if it had its own separate presidentially appointed director, which was an office unto itself?
I'm not able to, at this point, say that that would be the only way to accomplish what we all want. And I've heard so many, not only congressional advocates and the creative community, we all want, and I'm including myself in that community, want to make sure that that office has everything it needs. And so if confirmed, I would like to work with Congress and to examine how we could really make sure that that happens.
Moving on to your discussion, and there's been a lot of discussion about the IT and the need for upgrading. We need to digitize the collection. We need to make it accessible, which you have clearly stated as a goal. You talked about your new CIO. I don't know him. I'm sure he's terrific, but I have one piece of advice dealing with IT on a large scale. Number one, trust but verify. Don't always go on what the IT people tell you. You sit down at the computer and make the website work. And if you can't make it work, ask them why. As governor, I used to have fun calling the 800 numbers in my state to see what you get for an answer and how long it takes them to answer. I'm serious about this because quite often I once was setting up a hearing here as a staff member. I called someone and said, who's going to be the witness? They said, it was Deputy Undersecretary. And I said, I don't know titles. Who is this guy? And the fellow gave an answer, which if I ever write a book about this place, this will be the title. He said, he's at the highest level where they still know anything. You and I are now above that level. So I really think it's important that you be the ultimate judge of whether things are working.
I can assure you, Senator, at this point, that in my discussions with Mr. Barton, who is the new CIO, and a permanent appointment, that had been part of the difficulty, that they had several different chief information officers, that in our discussions, he was able to explain things to me, from petabytes to the security needs to the storage and everything, in a way that I could repeat it and actually knew what he was saying. And that gave me, and I worked with IT professionals for a number of years on very difficult projects, and that is you are right, that is the test. If they can explain it and also make you understand, and if I can get on the website or whatever function that is being presented and do well, that's a good sign.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. I would also mention that, and you touched on it, security is going to be more and more important going forward, and copyrights as well as the digitization of the collection.
Right.
Senator Bozeman.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Dr. Hayden, I appreciate you coming by the office not too long ago and having a good visit. You are a very distinguished, accomplished lady, and I also want to give a shout out to your mom, since she's got strong Arkansas ties, I think through Helena, if I remember right. So that makes her very special. Like I say, you're special, but she's very special. We've touched on a few of these things. There's been a lot of talk about the copyright, and the challenges there. But besides the copyright, what would be your biggest priorities? What do you see as the biggest challenges with the job as you come in?
Thank you, and especially for the shout out for Helena. I must say my mom was very thrilled when I put the pin on the Arkansas state.
I was thrilled
for her,
too.
with Lexia and everything. One of the biggest challenges now that the technology infrastructure and securing that base for all operations, including the special operations, copyright, and the Congressional Research Service has special IT needs as well, will be to bring the leadership team and the wonderful staff members at the Library of Congress together with a shared vision and to work as a team together to advance. Sometimes, as you probably know, with larger organizations that have these specialized aspects, it's hard to get out of the silo effect. And so the challenge, but also I think the one that has one of the greatest rewards of any management, let's see, how do I put it? I said challenge, but a management opportunity is to get everyone rowing in the same direction. And I think that just meeting with the senior staff members, I'm assured that they all have the same goal in mind,
Sure.
to make the Library of Congress in all of its functions and mandates the best.
We do a lot of things in Congress, or there's a feeling, that perhaps, that we do things that you could argue whether or not we should be doing. The Library of Congress is special, and I would argue that I can't do that as an individual. Their function, states can't do it. It is a very special institution. And I always encourage people that are up here visiting to be sure and go to the Library of Congress. It's probably the most beautiful building inside of any that we have. And it really is a national treasure. And you've touched on this before, but I want to touch on it again because I think it's so very important. Not everybody gets to come up here, and experience that. tell me again about some of your plans, how to get the library out to the, to the hinterlands, particular rural areas, places like Helena, and this and that. How do we do that? How do we do a better job?
Thank you for that, because the rural areas sometimes are not given the attention that they deserve in bringing culture and bringing information beyond just the basics of making sure they have the broadband capacity to take advantage of the online resources. I mentioned earlier in a small town having access to Abraham Lincoln's papers, or popular play now, Hamilton, and the fact that the papers of Alexander Hamilton are available online. It would be important also to be able to have exhibits that travel, low-cost exhibits that could take advantage of reproductions that could be in church halls, that could be anywhere in a town. And coming from a background that my dad was born in a town of 10,000. I mentioned my grandfather was he was the postman there. It means so much to have access to special types of things. So not only would the exhibits possibly be able to be put into different places in a town, but possibly some of the artifacts themselves, primary sources, if they could travel. It's been done with the Smithsonian and other institutions, and it could do it with the Library of Congress.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Bozeman. Got a couple of other questions. Being the president of the American Library Association is, I'm sure, a great honor, but maybe not an unmixed blessing, because suddenly you're responsible for everything that's being talked about as part of the association. There are a couple areas of criticism that you and I have talked about, and I'd like to get your response to those on the record today. One was when the Congress passed the Children's Internet Protection Act, the American Library Association challenged the constitutionality of that, arguing that it violated the First Amendment. And I know, beginning then as a leader of the national organization through really up till now, you've commented on this several times, but you want to talk about that whole issue of what kind of violation that would have been, and then the issue of what kinds of things need to happen in a library to be sure that children don't have access to material that we wouldn't want children to have access to, and then how often you have to revisit that whole concept.
I really appreciate that question, Senator, because there's been quite a bit of just misinterpretation of the Library Association's position during that time. That was 2003, 2004, and at that time, the filters that would have been required for libraries to install were found to prohibit access to very important health information, and the most notable at that time was breast cancer. And since that time, the technology has improved, and the filters that are installed to receive federal funding in my library, the Pratt Library, and in its state role has installed filters, have improved, and the need to be vigilant is also something that libraries are doing in not only the technological aspect, but just plain physical arrangements of computers, making sure that there are face-out positioning of computer monitors, as well as very few, if any, cubicles that contain computers as well, and education, and making sure that people know that pornography is illegal, and we do not support that in any shape or form.
So you don't think that pornography, illegal as you described it, has a place in the library?
Bottom line, no.
And there are, at the same time, things in the library that aren't appropriate for everybody that visits the library to see.
Right, and Senator, the way you described it is exactly the way that libraries even design their buildings and the furniture, and making sure there's even signage that unaccompanied adults in children's sections are going to be questioned. There are so many safety measures that are put in public libraries and even college and university libraries to make sure that minors are safe and that they are not exposed to objectionable material as far as we can prevent.
And while your final degree was a PhD from the University of Chicago, a very highly respected institution, a lot of your early work was as a children's librarian. A lot of your early focus was that. So these are issues that you have always cared about?
Yes, and it's been interesting to see how, and I mentioned earlier with the C for caution with copyright, that if you pay attention in the front end, it sometimes really helps in terms of later. And working with young people and seeing what imagination can be sparked. 3D printers now are in libraries, and that's the perfect time to let young people know that all of this information that you can now get on your device is not free for you to use and just put your name on it. So I've been very involved in youth issues for quite a while.
Well, I thought just the example you gave of how you early on expressed to somebody the importance of their own creative work was an indication of the way you would approach a number of these issues. On another thing from the American Library Association, when the Patriot Act was passed, librarians objected to a particular part of that, and in fact, the law was changed, I think, for what's now called the librarian's provision. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes, that was quite a time. That was also in 2003, 2004, and the entire nation was concerned about security, and it was a time of great apprehension, and people were going into libraries to find information about all of the different aspects of what was going on. And the library community was just very concerned that in the quest for security and making sure that we were all safe, that the public's rights were also considered as well. And since that time, there have been a number of reforms to the Patriot Act with the approval of Congress that have helped to alleviate the library community's concerns, and I think I can also say that the American Library Association is very pleased at the progress that's been made to balance security and personal rights.
And so would an example of that, Dr. Hayden, would an example of that be under that original discussion, there was some thought that law enforcement might be able to come in and just say, we'd like to look through your records and see who's been looking at certain books, looking up certain things, or even we'd like to look at a certain person's library record without a court saying that that was necessary? Was that the concern?
That was the basis of it, and especially the bulk collection of information about who was interested in a subject. What we were concerned about, and especially at that time, 2003, 2004, that interest in a subject would be or could be misinterpreted as intent to do something. So interest and intent were not equal, we were saying.
I think that's a position I believe the country has generally come to, and I think your explanation of 2002 and 3 was also a good one, that everybody's trying to figure out what can we do to stop this from happening again, and sometimes that requires a lengthy discussion as to the right way to do that. Any follow-up questions, Senator Cochran, Senator Bozeman? Well, we will have the record open until the time I announced earlier for additional questions. Anything you want to add, Dr. Hayden, that you wish had been asked that wasn't? Any topic you want to cover?
Well, I had a few. And I just wanted, though, to thank everyone for their support and for your consideration, Mr. Chairman. And I really appreciate this opportunity and to be nominated as a librarian, a career librarian. I must tell you, this is one of the highest honors, and I thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. This hearing's adjourned.